talk a little bit about the Ten Sefirot. We all know what they are, but to understand a little bit some very fundamental basic questions when we think about the Sefirot is why there are 10 Sefirot and not 9 or 11, 12 or 13, why 10 in particular, why they needed, why couldn't the Creator create a world without the Sefirot, what's this whole sort of this middle intermediate between the infinite and the finite, why do we need the Sefirot, what's the source of the Sefirot, where do they come from, are they creations, are they part of the Creator? So there was a book that was written in the late 1400s by Rameir Ben Gabbai, a Spanish Kabbalist, called Avodas HaKodesh. And in there he discusses something about the Koyach HaGvul, the potential of infinity, and the potential of finitude. And there's a famous quote that's quoted from that text that says, Kashem sheyesh lekoyach v'bilti b'gvul, just like the infinite one, the Creator has a potential for infinity, kach yesh lekoyach ha'gvul, the same thing also the infinite one, or the Creator has a potential for finitude. Now this quote actually originates from an earlier teaching. The Ramban, Nachmanides, was a Mekubal, was a Kabbalist, and his teacher was Israel of Gerona. Israel of Gerona was a student of Yitzchak Saginar, Yitzchak the blind, Isaac the blind, and he was a son of the Ravid. And the Ravid is the time of the Rambam, and he wrote a commentary on the Rambam. So you have the Ravid, the Ravid, who has son is Isaac the blind, which literally he was actually blind, and he had a student called Elazar of Gerona, and he taught the Ramban Kabbalah. That's the Shashalas of Kabbalah comes from. That's the tradition of Kabbalah comes from. And from the Ramban, we have all the students in the Ramban, great Kabbalists. There are Kanti and the Tzioni and Yitzchak the Binaka. These are all the great students in the Ramban. Israel of Gerona wrote a very short book called Bir Sefiros, the explanation of the 10 Sefirot. And he addresses some of these questions of why 10, why not 9, why not 11, why do we need them, what's their source. So the first thing that he observes is something that we see everything in nature that we'll understand. If we get a little bit deeper, we'll understand that this actually replicates itself throughout all of creation, throughout all of nature. He says that everything in this world, in the physical world, in the physical realm, has a oirach, which is a length, a reicha, which is a width, and an oivi, which is thickness. So it has length, width, and density. Every single object. It says oirach, reicha, and oivi. These are the three. And later on we'll see that in the teachings of the Arizal, which some of the teachings we brought down in the past, where a lot of things are divided into three processes, because they're replicating these three. Each one of these three, let's say the length, the width, or the oivi, oirach, reichav, and oimek, oivi, each one of these three has a rosh, a toich, and a soif. Has a beginning, an end, and a middle. So every object, no matter how minuscule it has a width, a length, and a thickness. And each of that has both a beginning, end, and a middle. So he says that this concept of 3, which is really 9, we find in every single object of creation. Then there's the container that it's not an actual width, length, or thickness, but then there's the space through which these 9 are formed. So he says this concept, which if you break it down now has 10, is the 10 Sefirot. And therefore, he's going to explain how this works, but this very quickly. Therefore, later on, when the Arizal spoke about the Sefirot in terms of partzufim, in terms of personas, which is one of the big novel Chiddush, and one of the big novelties of the teachings of the Ari is that unlike the teachings of the Ramak before him, Kardavera, which speaks about the Sefiros as each singular Chesed and Gevura and Tiferes, each as a single unit, the Arizal speaks about each Sefira as containing 10. So Chesed has Chesed, Gevura, Chesed, each one has 10, and this is actually replicated over and over and over again, because the best image would be like a holographic image. So the full structure is 10, but each substructure of the 1 contains actually the 10, and each one of those, of that 1, contains another 10, and another 10, and another 10, and another 10. Okay? That's the substructure. This idea is because everything has an Orech, Rechev, and Oimek. Everything has a width, breadth, Orech, length, and width, and a density. And everything has the place that contains those 9. Therefore, in very simple language, when we look at the Sefirot, you say Chesed is a particular sphere. We're going to talk about what the Sefirot are in a moment. But you say Chesed is a particular sphere, Gvur is a particular sphere. These are all expressions. You can have an expression of Chachma, of wisdom, an expression of Bina. And we're going to understand that there are actually 10 progressive states. That every creativity starts with Keser and completes with Malchus. But Malchut in itself is actually not a Sefira. Less like a Mary Klum, it has nothing on its own. Malchus is the receiver that receives all the chesed. So in the relation, let's say there are 2 people having relationships, and we'll discuss this a little further and how they work in the spheres, but let's say 2 people having a relationship, so you're giving, let's say, chesed. The person that's receiving your chesed is Malchus. If, let's say, you're showing restraint, the person that's receiving your gvura, that's the Malchus. So Malchus is the container that's receiving that. So therefore Malchus has no light on its own. So he says that's actually replicated in creation. So what the deeper understanding of this is, that the 10 Sefirot is a structure, a meta-structure that's found throughout all worlds. So we talk about the structure of the universe functioning with these 10 dimensions, 9, and then the 10th that contains it. He says that's on a physical level. In the world of Asiyah, this is the way it is. But the same 10 will replicate itself in a more spiritual realm, or in an emotional place. Let's say the world of Yitzir, which is an emotional space, or Bria, which is a mental state, or Atzilus, which is a spiritual state. The 10 always replicates itself. The only difference is that the quality of the 10 changes. So here you have quality of the 10. You say this is a table. Okay, the table has Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisod, Malchus, has all 9 dimensions, right? Has the length, the width, and the breadth, which is 3 plus the 3 of the beginning and its middle. There's 3 triangles to everything, right? Chachma Bina, or Keser Chachma Bina is 1 triangle, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes is another triangle, Netzach Yisod is a 3rd triangle. So you have the 3 triangles, they correspond to the length, the width, and the breadth, right? So it's always 3. And then there's a container, which is the 10th, which is Malchus. So every object actually has 10 Sefiros. This we'll understand on a physical level, and then you'll say how it works on an emotional level and how it works on an intellectual level. But it always goes through the process of 10. And the 10th will be the receiver. So this is what he says that we find in creation. If you look at the physical world, we see these 10. Okay. Now, what's the root of these 10? Why are there 10? Okay, so the fact is that there's Arach, Arach, and Oimek, there's a width and breadth and density. But why is it that way? Where does it come from? So he says that this is what the Sefer Yetzirah says, that there's Spheres B'lima, there are 10 spheres without anything. The 10 spheres without anything are the 10 Sefirot that exist within the Ein Sof, before creation. He doesn't talk about the Tzimtzum, but before any process of creation, there are already 10 Sefirot. Another way of phrasing it, this is the way he languages this, is that there's something that's called Shalem, which is perfection, and something that's called Cheser, which is lacking perfection, or in our estimation, which is lacking perfection, or saying there's something that's called infinite and something that's called finite. If the creator is truly the creator, and that's the best word to say the creator, but let's call God, or Atzmos, or the source of light. If the ultimate is truly the ultimate, then it must contain both finite and infinity, which means it must have the potential to express itself infinitely, and it must have the potential to stop expressing itself. Where is the koach, where is the potential of finitude, or the potential of cheser within the creator? That's the Sefiros. That's the 10 Sefirot. The 10 dimensions is an Orach, Reich, and Oimek, the same idea, right? There's a width, breadth, and length. conceptually, as physically, there's these three concepts, which is really 9 and the 10th, which is Malchus. The same thing also conceptually, that within I'm going to say the word Ein Sof, but I don't mean the Ein Sof. The Ein Sof is infinitely expressed. It's not Ein Latchila. It's not without beginning. It's without end. Ein Sof, with no end. That's not the creator. That's not the source of light. The source of light has Ein Latchila, has no beginning. And then from the source of light, there's a light that emanates. That's Ein Sof. That's infinite. That expands infinitely. So let's say we have to draw just the map, and this is obviously we can't really do this, but let's say this is the essence of the creator, or this is the Mar. This is the source of light. The source of light is expressed infinitely in the Koach HaBli, in the infinite potential, and within the essence, because it's essence, just like it has potential for infinity, it has potential for finitude. So it's not a new creation. The 10 Sefirot is not something new that was created. The 10 Sefirot is already part of the creator. The only difference between before creation and after creation is if you have, it's a very simple analogy. If you take a light, a candle, you strike a match, and you walk out in the sun is shining brightly, you don't see the fire. You walk into a place that's dark, you see the fire. Okay? What is that image? That image is like this. When you have the infinite light expressed, and it's not light, but you have infinity expressed, finitude becomes completely submerged, and you don't see the finitude. So before the Tzimtzum, there was finitude, which just wasn't revealed. So the Tzimtzum, the contraction of the infinite light, actually didn't create anything. The contraction of the infinite light did not create finitude, because if it created finitude, this is the problem. If it created something that's finite, that means it was something that's new. And if something new, it means that the creator is not complete, because it has something that didn't exist. If there was something that was created through the contraction, through the Tzimtzum, which is not part of God, then God is not complete, because God doesn't have creation. Right? If something was new created, that means that this is something that's added to God, and God is completion, so it has to include also creation. So in other words, the only way we could say God is complete is that God is both infinite and finite. But before the Tzimtzum, finitude, or chesed, or the absence of completion, was completely overwhelmed by infinity, that the infinite light completely submerged and overwhelmed the finite vessels. And then when there was the Tzimtzum, it's like a person lighting a match, going out in the sun. You don't see the match. It gets dark. All of a sudden you see the match. You see the flame. So the flame was there before. The Tzimtzum takes away the bigger light and allows the smaller lights to be revealed. The infinite light becomes concealed. It was contraction. And the finite light becomes revealed. So where is the source of the 10 Sefirot? The source of the 10 Sefirot are actually in the Creator. And they're not new creations. It's part of the Creator. We call them Bli Ma, without anything, because they're never revealed. They're only revealed after the Tzimtzum, after the contraction. Why 10? Because that's what it was. That was the 10, and the 10 was the complete number, which eventually is replicated throughout all creation. We see the number 10. The process of 10, in the analogy would be, and this comes really more from the Maggid of Mezrich and from the Baal Shem Tov, the analogy of the 10 would be just like a person creates something. We'll talk it on a conceptual level. Let's say you decide you want to cook yourself, you want to make yourself breakfast. Okay? So you have a will. Let's start from all the Sefirot, how it works. You have a will, a desire for breakfast. No, that's a cheshek, but that's keser. That's keter. Keter is desire, correct. You have a desire, this is what you want. Okay? You want to have a good breakfast. So how's the process? How actually do you go ahead and create this? So what you do is, first thing is, you have a certain image of what you want for breakfast. So you have a desire for breakfast, then you have an image that you wanted your omelet to look like this or like that. But it's not really detailed and defined, but it's a sort of a sense of what you want. Yeah. But the image is complete. It's like one full image of what you want. Now, I just want to say this, that Keter and Malchus would be the same thing, because Keter is the original vision of what you want, the desire to have it, and it's only reach its fruition when it actually comes into actuality is when there's a plate in front of you. That's the Malchus. It's the receiver of all this process. But the process goes, so first is Chachma, which is a certain intuition. Okay, I want this to look this way. I have a certain idea. Then you start thinking, okay, wait a second, but that's the right part of the brain, or the chesed, the chachma. Then the left part is bina, which is the part that starts dissecting and saying, okay, so exactly how am I going to make this? In order to do this, I have to get, this ingredient, that ingredient. So bina is breaking down into details. So that's why chachma, is seen as a right column sphere, because it's giving and it's expressive and it's not defined yet. And that's why it's also seen as vision, seeing, or water. And bina is already breaking down into details. It's more like a left brain activity, where you're breaking down, dissecting into details, and creating a specific image that we want to create through these different details. I need this ingredient, that ingredient, the other ingredient in order to create it. Okay, this is the bina process. Then you have das here, if you're going to count das, which das would be in the place of keter, or sometimes if you count keser, you don't count das. If you count das, you don't count keser. But let's say das would be counted here. Das would be the actual implementation. Okay, so you have this creative idea, this is what you want to create for yourself. I'm using breakfast as an example. I'm going to create anything. This is what you want to create for yourself. This is the ingredients you want to do. And das is, okay, this is the decision, exactly how I'm going to make it. So das is like the executive part of the brain, the part of the brain that makes real choices and says, okay, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to stand here and do this. Okay, that's das. Then, this is all in the head. Now you have to actually go ahead and make it. So there's 3 stages here. Chesed is you turn on the fire, you whip the eggs. This is all chesed. You're creating. Okay, now let's give it a very simple example. You start turning on the fire. When you're turning on the fire, and the fire is being turned on, that's an act of chesed. If you would just have chesed, you would turn the fire until it just gets to the highest potential of the fire. So Gvur comes along and says, wait a second, if I'm going to turn the fire too high, it's going to burn the eggs. It's not going to work. I can't cook this way. So Gvur is the restraining. So Chesed is the right column, which is I want to create, and Gvur is the restriction, says that I stop here. Right? So you have to know how much oil, everything is measured. So that's the Gvur, the restraining. What's Tiferes? Tiferes is the middle column. We didn't talk about the middle column, but Tiferes would be the same thing like the middle column, which means the balance between how much do you want to give and how much you want to withhold. How much chesed do you want to give and how much gevurah do you want. Right? So the chesed and gevurah in Tiferes is the middle ground. Yeah?
Are you taking questions?
Yeah, we'll take questions afterwards. Okay. Yeah, so then we have this idea of chesed, gevurah, Tiferes. These again, this is the second triangle. So you have chachma, bina, das, and chesed, gevurah, Tiferes. That's what you're actually creating. Then the third element is like this. I'll tell you, there are 2 ways how to look at it. I'll first tell you the way the Maggid of Mezrich speaks about it, and then I'll tell you another way to look at it. The Maggid talks about it in terms of how Netzach Chod Yesod, which is called Nehi. So you have Chachma Bina Das, which is Chabad, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes, which is called Chagas, and Netzach Chod Yesod is called Nehi. Netzach Chod Yesod, right? It's an acronym for Nehi. Nehi Sefirot is generally the awareness of who you're creating it for. So let's say you're making an egg for somebody, or you're creating whatever your creativity you're creating for the other person. Nehi is the awareness of the other. Nehi is the chesed of the other person. Netzach is the chesed of the other person. Hod is the gevurah of the other person, and Yesod is the Tiferes of the other person. So they're inverted images. So that's why you have, like, let's say, the Magen David. So it's like an inverted image of yourself. So you have chesed, some giving. But the netzach is the awareness of what does that person need. Okay, the person said he wants a breakfast, and I want to treat them, I want to give them a good breakfast, but maybe they don't want, I'm just going to pour a lot of salt, but maybe I like that, but what does the person like? So chesed would say, I'll just pour as much salt as I want. Netzach would say, I'm aware of the other person's chesed. Same also with gevurah, so you're refraining. So it's the awareness of the other, and then the balance, the perfect place of balance. There's another way to look at Netzach Chod Yesod, which is that they're actually talking about the way you express emotions. So we're, in very simple terms, we're actually only expressing either chesed or gvurah or tiferes at all times. Everything that we do in our life, any emotion that we have, we're either expressing ourselves, which is giving, or we're retracting, we're withdrawing. Right. So are you you're extroverting or you're introverting? Either you're going out or you're moving in. If you're having fear, then you're moving in. If you're feeling love, you're moving out. Every emotion that you have, you're either moving in or you're moving out, or there's some type of balance between the two. Right. So it's either a chesed, a gvur, or a tiferes. Every emotion. There are only three emotions that we can have. Really, there's only two. There's only chesed and gvur. That's inhale and exhale and moving and outwards and forward. These are all the same movements that you can only go this way or that way. Now, in the emotion itself, let's say I'm desiring to express chesed, or I'm desiring to refrain gvura, and I'm withholding. This emotion itself, there's an underlying emotion, which is, why am I expressing chesed? What's the root of the chesed, or how am I expressing chesed, would be a better way to phrase it. Is my chesed being expressed through netzach, or is my chesed being expressed through hod? Netzach, internally, would be the emotion of self-confidence. And hod, internally, is the emotion of the left column, which is humility. So when you're expressing something, and then you saw there's the balance between self-confidence and humility, which is always the best place to be. When you're expressing something, let's say you're giving a kindness, or you're being nice to another person, it can come from two places. It can come because you're a very confident person, you feel good about yourself, you want to express it, or because you feel very lousy about yourself, and it's just you feel completely humiliated, and you're feeling that's the way to gain another person's love. You can either come from a netzach place, or a place of hod. Now, either one in the extreme is not good, because extreme self-confidence maybe can lead to arrogance, and extreme humility leaves you to feel like a doormat. So really the balance is yisod. So the underlying emotion of chesed and gvura, so you're either doing chesed or you're doing gvura. The emotions that you're expressing, the underlying idea is that it's either through netzach or hod, or yisod, which is the balance. Okay, so you have expressions within yourself, the movement outward or inward, it's chesed and gvura or tiferes, and the way you're expressing yourself is either through netzach, hod, and yisod. The same thing also, we talked about creating a breakfast for yourself. It's the same thing. You're feeling very good, you want to have a good breakfast, or you're feeling very bad about yourself, maybe you want to eat, it can either be a netzach, right? What's the reason why you're doing it? So it's the way we're actually creating is that it actually processes through this process. First you have a desire, then you have a certain conception of what the idea is, but it's not really formed in detail. Then you break it down into details and say, this is exactly how I'm going to do it. Then you make the choices of exactly how you're going to do it. Then you either you express and you refrain a little bit, you do the balance, and you're feeling netzach or hod, yisod. Malchus, what is malchus? Malchus is the final product. That you actually have the breakfast in front of you, that's your actual final product. That's why malchus is linked with keser, right? Because the beginning is wedged in the end, because you had a certain desire for something, and that's the actual desire. When it finally comes to fruition, that's the actual breakfast you had. So the first conception, you didn't yet know exactly what the materials that you need, and what's the ingredients, and how you're going to cook it, and where you're going to be. That you have to go through chachma, bina, and das. You have to go through all those stages. So you have to go through all those stages to reach the place of malchus, but malchus is the final product. So if you take the great scheme of the universe, and you say everything originates from Keser and Malchus is the earth, so Malchus is really the end game, right? Because that's all these spiritual worlds, which correspond to all the Sefirot, if you map them out like a hologram, right? So you have Chachma in the world of Atzilus, and Bina in the world of Bria, and the six emotions in the world of Yitzira, and then Malchus is in the world of Asiya. So everything actually is for here, because this is the end. This is what we find. This is what. Now, in a refined way, if you ask somebody. Internally, let's say, how is we're talking about breakfast, but it could be anything, let's say creativity. How is your creativity, your conception of creativity, the way it exists in your chachma, and the way it exists in your malchus, is not necessarily, sometimes when it exists in the chachma state, it's much richer, and it finally materializes, it's an object, but when it existed in your mind, it was so much more rich and flavored. So in an internal level, Chachma feels higher, Bina feels higher, Gvur Chesed feels, these Sefiros feel higher. That's why we talk of them as higher universes. But on a very deep level, the ultimate is only expressed in Malchus, and that's why the ultimate of creation, the ultimate objective of creation is in Malchus, which is the finality of creation. And so this is the process of the 10 Sefiros. Why there are actually 10? Because each one is flowing one for the next. It starts off in conception. That's why Keser, another point, Keser is called Ayin, And the rest of the spheres are called yesh because keser is the desire. It doesn't have yet. What do you want? I want breakfast. Exactly what exactly do you want? I don't know. I want something. I should feel good, right? So that's your keser. It's ayin. It's not yet conceived as a particular idea. When it comes to malchus, that's the final product. So it goes through the stages. Chachma is already a bigger image, and bina is certainly more yesh, and more yesh, and more yesh, and more yesh, and more yesh, until you finally have the breakfast out in front of you. That's the malchus. So everything begins as ayin. Right? It's nothing. It has no form, and then it finally becomes form when it becomes its malchus. So this structure of from keser to malchus exists also within this same structure, just in a different qualitatively it's different. It exists in the physical world and exists also within the Ein Sof. The difference is that before creation, before the Tzimtzum, the finite, these 10 Sefirot exist within completely submerged, completely overwhelmed by the Ein Sof. The process of the Tzimtzum, the process of contraction, the process of creation is to revealing these 10 Sefirot. And this answers the question of why we need the 10 Sefirot. Why do we need the 10 Sefirot? Because this is the way that nothing, I mean, we can figure out another way, but this is the way we can understand, at least rationally we can understand how creation is not an addition to the Creator, and how the Creator still remains complete even though something was added, like finitude. And the answer is that it wasn't really added, because the root of all finite existence, and that's what we said, the Orach, Rechav, and Omek of everything, the 3 dimensions, which is really 3, which is 9, which is 10. The root of every dimension of this universe, the physical universe, is really rooted in the 10 Sefirot. And the 10 Sefirot is not a new creation. The 10 Sefirot is actually part of the Ein Sof before the contraction. It just wasn't revealed. So the 10 Sefirot is not an addition. It was always there. What only happens in creation is that now it becomes revealed. Right? So now the Sefirot are becoming revealed. The world is becoming revealed. Finitude is becoming revealed, because that's the act of the contraction. And what we have to do, and that's the malchus, what's the final objective of everything, is that we, as finite existence, as finite beings in our bodies, as yesh, we have to recognize that our finite expressions is really rooted in the Ein Sof, is really part of the Ein Sof, is really part of Hashem. It was always part of Hashem. It feels as a distance because of the Tzimtzum, because of the contraction. The more we feel the contraction, the Ein Sof is contracted, the more we feel ourselves independent. The more we feel that we're connected, the less of the Tzimtzum exists. And that's the process of the Malchus. Okay.